Welcome back, everybody. Powerhouse Monday rolls on. This is our new football lineup. Kolpak is here. He'll be with us at 10 because we're doing our Bison video blog after the show as well. So accommodating things is our guy Sam Herder. We've had Sam on for the last 4 years, each and every Monday, and we're going to do it again here this season. And boy, we got off to a bang this weekend with what happened. Sam, we just had Brent Vegan on the show. I'll ask you, I know it's August 26th, but how big can this be come November 26th with what Montana State did on Saturday?
Yeah, everything kind of just points to, playoff positioning and all that. And even if it is week 0, week 1, we're talking about seeds and who can be in and all that. And I think this is anytime you have an FBS win, it's going to be important. There are layers to it. I know the FCS playoff committee, they don't just say, okay, you have an FBS win and they just put a check mark next to it. They look at how, beating 0-11 UConn for an example, isn't as good as beating, whatever an 8-5 MAC team,
Yep.
as an example. So I know Montana State fans should now be cheering for New Mexico to go on and finish 8-4 or whatever like that, because that just makes the win even better. But overall, anytime you have an FBS win, that's always kind of just a notch on your belt that can help. That can be the difference between a 3 seed and a 2 seed and home field advantage in the semifinals.
Just visiting with Veeg, Sam, just how that game played out. They gave up 14 points offensively with 2 fumble recoveries for touchdowns, but we saw a revamped Montana State. I know New Mexico may not be very good, but a revamped Montana State offensive line, and they were able to run the football. That is, if I'm looking at them and I'm watching the game and looking to the big sky, I'm like, Montana State looks like they haven't, and they didn't have Julius Davis in the game. Looks like they haven't missed a beat.
Yeah, I said in the preseason too that I think Montana State's offense overall could be one of the best in the FCS.
Yeah.
Passing game was iffy when they needed it most. Tommy Mellott delivered, but there were some ugly moments in the passing game in the first half. But running game, even like you said, with the revamped offensive line, they were getting a great push. And both of their starting offensive tackles from last year moved inside to guard. I mean, Marcus Ware went from one of the best offensive tackles in the FCS last year to now he's right guard, and he must have had a great game. I know they were running behind him a lot because all of a sudden he went from being somewhat on the NFL radar to now all of a sudden fully on the NFL draft radar. So I think their rushing attack is going to be really good all year. And like you said, we don't know really much about New Mexico. Like this team, we know the program overall isn't very good, but this team might be pretty good. I mean, I don't know. It's a weird game to analyze because Montana State was so heavily favored and they win by 4, where you kind of go, okay, that's a good win, a gutsy win, comeback win, all of that. They also only won by 4 when they were 13.5-point favorite.
Right.
So I don't know. It's just really weird to analyze, but overall, I think you have to be impressed because, listening to Coach Vegan, they faced a lot of adversity, obviously, this weekend. And last year when they faced adversity, they kind of just shrunk in the moment, and this time around they did not.
And that's that. I thought I picked up the same thing when Veeks mentioned that. There, you saw those moments even last year in the Bison playoff game where, and I know Mellott got hurt, that they had opportunities to put that game away and they couldn't do it, and they found a way here. I'm intrigued. I really am. I knew they were already high up on my radar anyway, Sam, of how I thought they were going to be, but this can catapult you. It really can. I mean, a kind of win like that, I know we're eons away from playoff football, but that can go, in my mind, I think it can go a long way.
Yeah, and their schedule beefs up toward the end of the season, but I mean they could go on a pretty good run here, and I had Montana State being undefeated all the way up until the UC Davis game. I think that's in November. Yep. Because they get a lot of their toughest matchups at home. So, yeah, I expect Montana State, as long as they stay healthy, they're going to go on a pretty decent run here. And I wouldn't expect a loss anytime soon.
Real quick on the Bobcats, they have Idaho at home in the middle of October. They have Sac State at home in early November. They go to Davis, and then they end the season. The Brawl of the Wild game is in Bozeman this year.
Yeah, and I think there's a chance that both Montana teams could be undefeated going into the Brawl of the Wild. Now, I think that UC Davis game could be difficult for Montana State, potentially a trap game. And I think Davis will be pretty good. But, I mean, when it comes to a battle for the top 2 seeds, top 4 playoff seeds, I think it's going to be a really, really competitive race to get those top two playoff seeds because the Montana schools are going to be in the mix. North Dakota State, I definitely think is going to be in the mix. South Dakota State's going to be in the mix. Villanova could be 11-1 with no ranked wins. Like, where do you put them? I don't know. So it's going to be a fun finish to the season. And yeah, I get it. We're only in week one, but
Yep.
we're always looking ahead. So.
And that's what we do. So let's do that for the other spotlight games we were visiting off air. It's not just the Bison game on Thursday night, which will have a ton of people on it, and I'll get to that in a minute. But there's a couple other that if I wasn't working Thursday night, I'd be Youngstown State and Villanova comes right to mind. Those are two teams that ended the season against each other last year. I was on the mindset I thought Youngstown would win the game. Villanova blew them out. That's got my attention. That's a huge game in week one.
Yeah, I got to get my Flow Sports subscription fired back up to watch that one. But that is a really intriguing game. And really, you look at the week one slate overall, there's a lot of FCS versus FBS games. A decent amount of them are actually pretty intriguing. But when it comes to FCS versus FCS, this is the most intriguing one by far. It's the only ranked versus ranked game. Youngstown State, number 25, Villanova, number 6. It's a rematch from last year's playoff game in the second round where Villanova really, I thought handled Youngstown State pretty easily. The final score wasn't awful, but Villanova ran pretty wild in that one against the Youngstown State defense that we thought was pretty good last year. And now Youngstown State's defense is completely revamped. They lost like 10 FBS guys or 10 guys to the FBS this offseason. So really interested to see how good Youngstown State can be. I'm really high on Villanova. I think their linebackers and safeties are really good. Connor Watkins, starting quarterback. So, I would probably look at a Villanova win here, but if it is more competitive than in the playoffs, I think that tells us a little bit more about Youngstown State as well.
You mentioned the FCS, FBS games. Our attention clearly will be on the Bison and Boulder. South Dakota State plays Oklahoma State, which that's going to be a fun game on Saturday. I'm looking at Illinois State and Iowa. Is there anything to make of that one, Sam, or nothing, or no, in your opinion?
I think that could be pretty competitive. I think Coach Ferentz is out, or he's suspended that game. I don't know if maybe that'll have an impact. Maybe it won't. But as we know, Iowa doesn't play the best brand of football, and really Illinois State's kind of, I shouldn't say not the best brand, not the most exciting brand.
Eye-pleasing. There's no doubt. Yep.
Yeah, and Illinois State kind of plays that style too under Brock Spack. Defensive minded, kind of grinded out offensively. So I think it could be a pretty low scoring game, pretty competitive game. Really interested to see the quarterback play for Illinois State because I know you're high on the Redbirds. I am too. I think their defense is going to be really good. I think they have a really good running back in Mason King. Offensive line is always pretty good. Their top wide receiver is coming back. If they can get their new quarterback to hit, Illinois State, I think, could be pretty good and especially be competitive in week one.
I have two games to ask you about for potential upsets. Central Arkansas at Arkansas State and SIU at BYU. I think Southern's going to win that game. What about the other one, UCA and Arkansas State?
Yeah, that's one I have circled as well.
Yeah.
I know we've actually really talked about Central Arkansas quite a bit on your show out of Fargo, which is interesting, but they're just a team that has really good individual talent. And I know Bison fans saw some of that individual talent on display, whether it was Shanderick Powell last year. David Walker had a really good game against the Bison. He's back, as well as a Buck Buchanan Award finalist. So there's a lot of individual talent for Central Arkansas. That's one I have circled that could, be a potential FCS over FBS win. There's actually a decent amount on Thursday that have potential to be FCS over FBS wins. Jackson State plays Louisiana Monroe, who's 134 out of 134 FBS teams, according to ESPN SP Plus rankings.
Yeah.
Which the fact that there's 134 teams in the FBS is like, come on, what are we doing here? We got to split things up a little bit. But I mean, Lafayette goes to Buffalo, Fordham goes to Bowling Green. It always seems like the MAC loses one or two,
no doubt,
two Patriot League teams. And then Sacramento State goes to San Jose State. San Jose State's not very good. Sac State has had FBS wins in the past. So there's going to be millions of eyeballs on the NDSU Colorado game, me as well. But there's, I would suggest having a couple other screens open as well because there could be some good ones.
All right. So on the Bison game, let's take this from two perspectives. Let's start first. If Colorado wins by 3 touchdowns, is that something that reflects poorly on them or on NDSU, or is how much of a mark would you hold against them if they get blown out Thursday night?
Yeah, I've always said that FCS versus FB or FCS versus FCS games are always the best gauge. Like, we'll know more about South Dakota State on how they look when they play UIW rather than Oklahoma State, because we've seen teams, I think it was 2022 or 21, where Montana State looked awful against Oregon State.
Yeah.
And then they went on to make the semifinals or the title game. We've also seen, there's also actually several examples of FCS teams beating FBS teams, and they don't even make the playoffs. And so I think sometimes we overreact to results. And so even if NDSU loses to Colorado by 17 points, that doesn't mean Montana State has to be ranked ahead of NDSU. Or even if NDSU could very easily win and South Dakota State could lose by 10 points, that doesn't mean NDSU has to be ranked ahead of South Dakota State going into, next week at this time, just because, I think FCS versus FBS results are so hard to analyze because you just don't know. Now, I think just because it's the Bison, a lot of people overreact and want them to be down more than they are down. So if the Bison do lose, is NDSU vulnerable, and all those narratives will come out. I don't know. If NDSU loses 42-0, then you can, maybe wave a red flag, but I think it'll be rather competitive. I think it's a tough matchup overall for
Yep.
NDSU, so I wouldn't be surprised if the Bison win, obviously, but I'm kind of expecting a loss, and I'm not gonna knock NDSU back 2 spots, if they lose. Unless, again, if it's 59-0, then you go, whoa, okay, but that's it's gonna be like a 7 or 10 point loss if the Bison do lose this game.
On the flip side, so okay, I hear what you're saying. If they do win, how do we not couch it to be the biggest thing ever? You understand what I'm saying? Like, okay, they win this game. They still have, obviously, a tough Valley schedule ahead, but boy, that can change a lot of people's perception on where NDSU is heading into the rest of the season.
Yeah, for sure. And if NDSU was preseason ranked number 7 for whatever reason,
Yes,
and they win this game, then yeah, you definitely bump them up. But I just don't know if you bump NDSU up over South Dakota State right now if the Bison were to win and the Jackrabbits were to lose, because that doesn't necessarily tell us for sure that NDSU is better than South Dakota State. Now, again, it's nothing is ever black and white. If NDSU wins 42-0 and South Dakota State loses 50-0, then okay, then maybe my argument isn't as strong there. But yeah, I think NDSU winning would obviously do a ton, not only for the team but the program, just the national attention they would get, and it would also, maybe wake the FCS up as well to say that the Bison are here to make a serious run at things.
I know you got to go. Last question for you. Under over, because you work for BetMGM, so I got to ask this as well. Under over FCS over FBS wins this weekend is 2.5. I'll set.
Ooh, that's a really good number. I'll go over.
All right.
Even though I don't think NDSU is going to win, I don't think South Dakota State is going to win either. But I look at that Jackson State ULM game,
Okay.
Lafayette Buffalo, Sac State San Jose State, Fordham Bowling Green. We talked about Central Arkansas and Arkansas State. UC Davis goes to Cal. That's somewhat interesting.
Okay.
So I'll go over.
All right.
I'll go over that number, even though the number 1 and number 2 teams in the FCS may not get those FBS wins.
This is gonna be so much fun each and every Monday. Thanks so much for the time, bud. We'll do this. We'll see how right you are next Monday. Okay.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you.
There's Sam Herder from BetMGM Hero Sports. He'll join us each and every Monday at 9:35 to recap the week that was in FCS football. He says over. That means at least 3 will win. Can I push on my own show? Is that allowed? Because I think that might be a better chance of that. I want to push. Because I tend to agree with him on the Bison and the Jacks. But there's some other ones you look down the board on Saturday that, and the best part is we're working Thursday, so we got Saturday off to watch all these games. That I've already said I like SIU to win. He mentioned a couple there that could be scary. SEMO and New Mexico State's one late on Saturday night. Keep your eye on that one. I like Central Arkansas potentially to get a win. So UC Davis plays Cal at 4 o'clock Saturday. Maybe. I'll just say this. With the dissolution of the Pac-12, we can finally watch, Cal, Stanford, Arizona. I know maybe some were clamoring for that, but those are games we finally get a chance to check out and watch. It's going to be fun. We're overdue for a break. We'll get caught up here. We'll wrap up hour one. Jeff Kolpak waiting in the wings to lead off our second hour to dive into the Bison and Colorado matchup just 3 days away. We wrap up hour one of Hot Mike right after this.